their old beliefs. So they would, you know, they would use, say, Saint Christopher and a statue or a medal of him, but it would actually represent their, the god of the harvest or the sun god or whatever, right? And so they would transfer their deities onto Catholic saints. That way they'd have all these saints in their house or wherever they were living, and it would look like they were being devout Catholics, but in reality they were actually, doing rituals, basically like they did back home or like their grandparents did back home. And that continues on to this day. I encountered that actually recently in Brazil, but when I was living there long term, when I was younger, it was very common. It's common in, as far as I know, in Puerto Rico. I think they call it Santeria there. It's common in Mexico. It's common all over. So yeah, I mean, it's voodoo in Louisiana or hoodoo,
Mm-hmm. So the reason I was thinking that potentially with the two marks per se that they thought were fang holes, let's say, could that not be in reality puncture marks from some sickos that are draining the blood?
Very much so. Yeah, that's a pretty good theory right there. In fact, in Puerto Rico, the first big make the news sighting happened in 1995, like you said. But in 1975, there were actually there was a large amount of livestock were happening in a small town in Puerto Rico, and no one saw what was doing it. And at the time, it was suspected to be like what they called a satanic cult that was doing the. So that's very possible that's still that was what did it, and that's still what's doing it. I know that in the Afro-Brazilian religions I encountered, they would sacrifice animals, chickens often because they're cheaper, but goats too, and dogs and stuff. So it's still very much a part of that whole belief system. Yeah.
Very interesting. Just as you were saying that, honestly, as a logical approach, it seems to be more logical to have that occurring per se than something like a vampire or unknown animal that specifically is just draining the blood, because a lot of people don't realize you have to have a very solidified and updated digestive system to be able to live off of that fluid because of all the metal bases inside of it and also the nutrients. That's why vampire bats are, as far as we know, the only species of animal that can consistently live off of blood. All right. Again, though, what predator just would leave a whole entire